You'd think being paid to hurt people would come with some sort of swagger, but most medieval torturers moved like ghosts, half hated, half forgotten. I'm your bedtime historian, and tonight I'll show you how the most feared men in town were often more afraid of their job than anyone they punished. A quiet knock, a back room, a stranger who won't make eye contact. That's how many towns filled the role of torturer when they could find someone willing. No parades, no public listing, just a hush hush meeting where the mayor's assistant might offer free lodging, some firewood, and a job no one wanted. If you're the kind of person who prefers your job interviews without daylight or small talk, you might just fit in. If stories like this feel more soothing than the news, maybe hit like and subscribe. Who knows, maybe the algorithm needs a nap too. Ever met a night owl with questionable morals? Drop your favorite medieval job title in the comments. I won't judge. Now dim. The lights maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing outside the gates of a small walled town. There's dew on the grass, and the only sound is the creak of wood as the guards unlock the side gate for you, just as instructed. You've been summoned discreetly. Word is, someone died recently, and the position is open again. Not many applied. Inside the council hall, no one mentions the word torturer. They say official duties or civic obligations. You're told the role involves assisting in judicial matters, maintaining public order, and carrying out punishments as prescribed by law. It all sounds very official until they slide over the tools in a sack thumb screws irons some things you don't want to name. They say the previous man retired, but the clerk's face twitches when he says it. You later hear he drowned himself in a well. The job is paid in coin beer and sometimes wool. They offer you a small house outside the walls. You'll be provided meals, though you'll eat alone. And there's a rule: you may not touch anyone inside the walls unless performing official duties. No market visits. No communal baths. Definitely no weddings. It's not just isolation. It's superstition. Some townspeople believe the torturer's touch brings illness. Others say your shadow can curse crops. Children are told not to look you in the eye, and yet they need you. By law, no trial can proceed without the threat of clarification. That's a gentle word for pain. The court doesn't want a killer. They want someone who can be both precise and forgettable. Someone who can get the confession they already expect. Someone who won't ask too many questions. Oddly enough, they don't care if you've done this before. In fact, experience makes them nervous. Too much enthusiasm might draw complaints. What they want is someone desperate enough to stay quiet but scared enough to be careful. Historians still argue how these jobs were filled. Some say they were inherited passed from father to son like a curse. Others believe towns simply forced outcasts into the role: criminals, debtors, or the unlucky. Records are sparse. On purpose. And if you take the job, you'll soon find that the tools are the least frightening part. The room smells like tallow and iron. On the bench in front of you lies a neat array of instruments, some terrifying, some oddly banal. There's a branding iron shaped like a teardrop, a pair of wooden wedges, something that looks suspiciously like a cobbler's awl. You've just been introduced to the torturer's toolkit, and it's not what you imagined. The first thing they hand you isn't a blade. It's a rag soaked in vinegar. For the nose says the man training you, an older torturer from a nearby town, his hands gnarled like tree roots. He demonstrates how to press the rag under a suspect's nostrils, then clamp the mouth shut. They pan it quickly, he says, with the weary tone of a man who's done this too often. Just don't let it go too long. Contrary to popular belief, the medieval torturer's arsenal wasn't a cabinet of horror movie props. More often, it was full of everyday tools repurposed with unnerving creativity. Shoemakers' awls, carpenters' clamps, leather straps, copper funnels. Some were used to prod some, to stretch some, to suffocate, and many simply to frighten. A confession didn't always require injury, just the suggestion of it. You pick up a thin wooden stick, no thicker than your finger. It's for under the fingernails, he says. No blood, no scars. Just pressure and silence. It's the silence that breaks people. It's legal, he adds almost apologetically. So long as they confess before the fingernail comes off. That distinction matters more than you'd think. In many regions, the law explicitly forbade shedding blood during interrogation. Why no one quite agrees, some historians argue it was to preserve the suspect for trial. Others think it was tied to Christian taboos about bodily harm. And some believe it was just a legal loophole, a way to keep using pain without technically breaking the rules. The funnel, for example, wasn't used for waterboarding. Not exactly. It was filled with water beer or vinegar, then poured slowly down the throat until the stomach swelled painfully. If the prisoner vomited, they started again. Technically, no blood was shed. Technically. Some items look innocent too innocent. There's a comb-like tool made of wood and polished bone. It was used, the man says, to scrape. He doesn't say what. You don't ask. The blacksmith who made these didn't specialize in cruelty. In fact, many tools were adapted from regular trades. The rack was based on a wine press. The pear-shaped device used for oral torture resembled a fruit core expander. Some scholars even believe certain items were invented by accident, then repurposed after success in an unrelated task. There's an argument among experts whether these tools were standardized or improvised. Some cities had formal inventories kept in sealed chests by the court clerk. Others relied on the torturer's personal collection, handed down like morbid heirlooms. You run your fingers over a set of iron tongs. Not sharp, not hot, just cold and quiet. The old man says nothing. He just packs the tools away in a bag that looks like it should hold groceries. And then he walks out, leaving you alone with the silence. A rooster crows in the distance, but you're already awake. You didn't sleep much, not in that house. It's a squat little cottage just outside the city's northern gate, close enough to hear the bells, far enough that no one ever visits. Your firewood was delivered by cart at dawn, left without a knock. Welcome to the torturer's house. There's a smell that never leaves. Smoke iron and something harder to name like damp stone and old fear. The walls are thick. The windows are narrow. The floor creaks even when you don't move. You half expect the house to breathe. Placement outside the city was intentional. No one said it directly, but the message was clear. This role comes with distance, emotional, spiritual, and geographic. You are not a citizen. You are a function. Some towns even forbade torturers from walking the streets during daylight unless summoned. And if you were seen, you were to walk, with your eyes down your hands, folded. Unclean, they said. Not in the plague sense, though. That didn't help, but in the moral one. Your job made you unfit for community. The isolation wasn't just physical, it seeped into your skin. The walls of your house bore no decoration, no family portraits, no tokens from past festivals. Even the hearth looked disinterested, as though reluctant to offer warmth to someone like you. Oddly, many torturers were were given decent wages and homes often better than those of simple laborers. But they came with a trade-off comfort without companionship. Some cities even mandated that torturers remain unmarried. Others allowed wives, but only if they too lived outside the walls cut off like you. Historians still debate whether this architectural exile was practical or punitive. Some say it was for safety, to prevent vengeful families from targeting the torturer. Others believe it served a symbolic purpose to keep the moral rot at a safe distance, like a leper's bell made of bricks. Your house has a shed where the tools are kept, not locked, just avoided. No one steals from you. You're the one person no thief envies. A broken rake lies in the corner. It's not yours. It was here when you moved in, and somehow you don't have the heart to throw it away. You learn to make your own meals. Bread mostly, stews with too much salt. You eat in silence. The town sends food weekly delivered by a boy who leaves it at the gate and runs. Once you caught him peeking through the slats. You waved. He screamed. Sometimes birds nest in the eaves. You let them. They're the only company you get. One evening, you name a sparrow Edgar. He never visits again. The evenings stretch long. No one knocks. No one calls. You learn to sharpen knives, not because they need it, but because the sound is something to do. You start talking to yourself, not out loud, just in your head. The walls listen. Or maybe it's the old fear still lingering. One night, the city bell rings 3 times. That's the signal. Someone needs clarification. The bell stops ringing, but its echo clings to your chest like damp linen. You walk into town under moonlight through the side gate left ajar for you alone. No greetings, just the thud of your boots on cobblestones and the flutter of curtains as shutters close at your passing. You're headed to the chamber, a cold, low-ceilinged room beneath the courthouse, where the rules of pain are written not in blood, but in loopholes. Inside, a clerk waits nervously, adjusting his collar. He hands you a parchment with tight handwriting. Only permitted methods, he mutters, as approved by the council. You nod, pretending to read it again. You've memorized it by now. The manuals are real. They exist. They outline exactly how much pressure, duration, and discomfort are allowed. The goal is to extract confession, not to kill. Technically, you're allowed to stretch, but not dislocate. Allowed to press, but not pierce. Burn, but only with materials under a specific temperature. Some towns banned fire altogether. Others encouraged it, so long as it didn't leave a lasting mark. And above all, no blood. The parchment lists acceptable tools, cord clamps, weights the Spanish chair. You note what's missing. Nothing sharp. Nothing messy. Pain, yes, but it must be elegant, clean, civic. Some historians argue this obsession with boundaries came from church influence. Others suggest it was bureaucratic, designed to protect the officials who ordered the interrogation. If there's no blood, one theory goes, there's no evidence of wrongdoing, legally speaking. But even in this sterile candlelit room, the line between pain and punishment blurs. You've seen men break from just the sight of the tools. Others joke nervously, begging for a second chance, a delay, a drink. One man once sang hymns so softly that even the scribe wept. There's always a scribe. Sitting in the corner, quill poised, face pale. His job is to record not just the confession, but that everything was by the book. He notes how many turns of the wheel, how long the cord was tightened, when the subject cried out. Tonight's subject is already here. A merchant's son accused of theft and blasphemy. He's tied to a bench, breathing quickly, but not screaming. Not yet. You glance at the parchment again, just enough to show procedure. Your tools lie nearby, arranged like cutlery. Cord, not rope. A cloth for the mouth. Sandbags to weigh down the limbs without leaving marks. You begin with silence. Always silence. The room is colder that way. The candle flickers. The boy swallows hard. There's a debate among scholars whether these methods were truly effective. Some say most confessions were false, merely desperate attempts to make the pain stop. Others believe the rituals themselves created a psychological pressure strong enough to draw truth lies and everything in between. You press the cloth to his lips, slowly, gently, just enough to start the panic. The scribe begins writing. You wonder not for the first time if the boy is guilty. But then again, your job isn't to decide, only to follow the rules, at least the ones written down. The town square is bustling with color. Today banners, flutter bells, ring, and bread sellers call out with crusty cheer. But none of that is for you. You wait behind a wooden fence, at the edge of the gathering eyes shaded by your hood. Today is the feast of St. Crispin, the only day of the year you're invited to eat with others, the only day they pretend you don't exist. The mayor made a show of it this morning, a table long enough for 20 placed in the public courtyard, set with real linens and pewter dishes. But as you approach, the laughter thins. The benches fill up, except for the one across from you. A plate is set there. No one takes it. You break your bread, sip your cider. Pretend not to notice the silence on your side of the table. This yearly meal wasn't always part of the calendar. Some towns instituted it by law forcing citizens to dine with the torturer at least once a year as a reminder that justice had a face. Others claim it was rooted in superstition that sharing bread could tame the torturer's power, make him human again, if only for a day. There's little agreement among scholars. Some see it as ritual appeasement, a symbolic reintegration. Others argue it was a way to test the torturer's loyalty. If he refused, he could be punished for arrogance. If he accepted, he endured shame in silence. You chew slowly. The boy across from you watches with wide eyes, clutching his mother's sleeve. She whispers something, and he looks away. You get used to that. The food is better than what you get at home. Stewed lamb, soft carrots, honeyed apples. A gift, a bribe. You're not sure. The baker who ladles your soup won't look at you, but her hand trembles as she pours. The musicians avoid your end of the table. The lute player skips a beat when he notices you. The dogs won't come near your feet. You finish quietly. Rise slowly. The mayor nods. A clerk jots down that you attended, partook, and left peaceably. Another year fulfilled. You pass the baker on your way out. Her eyes dart up for a second, then down again. She says nothing, but a roll of fresh bread sits on the wall beside her cart. You take it. You don't say thank you. It's safer that way. Back home, you set the roll aside. You're not hungry. Not after that strange banquet of stares and silence. You sit by the hearth, the bread untouched, and listen to the wind push at the shutters like a cat that's forgotten it's unwelcome. That night, you dream of the table, only this time it's full. Everyone's laughing, eating clinking cups. You raise your glass too, but when you sip, the cup is empty. Always was. You wake before dawn alone again. The roll is still on the table hardening. Some birds peck at the windowsill. You think of naming one Edgar. Then remember you already tried that. You're summoned again before sunrise. This time, The subject hasn't even been officially charged. The scribe calls it a preliminary clarification. That's code for something uglier, a confession hunt. Before the trial, before the evidence, before the accused even knows the charges. You walk to the chamber, with heavy steps, already knowing the ending. The man waiting for you is middle-aged, red-faced, and trembling, not with guilt, but confusion. He's a stonemason, they say. There was a theft near the chapel, and he's been named by a neighbor with a grudge and a loud mouth. That's all it takes. He blinks at you, as if trying to remember where he knows your face from. He doesn't. You're no one. That's the point. Just a few questions, the bailiff says. But the questions are shaped like traps, and the answers are already expected. You lay out the tools anyway. Cords, wedges the cloth, the chair with buckled straps, and let silence do its work. Some towns developed a method for this stage, unofficial, unwritten, but widely practiced. They called it opening the door. A suspect would be questioned in the presence of the instruments, encouraged to confess before any formal measures were taken. If that failed, you would proceed to minimal discomfort. Another euphemism, pain with plausible deniability. There's no blood today, just the press of wood under the nails, the slow twist of a cloth looped around the forearms. The man cries out, not from agony, but the realization that there's no way back. His guilt or innocence won't change what happens next. Only his confession might. Historians remain divided on how common these pretrial sessions were. Some say they were rare, used only when the court was under pressure. Others claim they were the norm, standard operating procedure in cities where justice worked backward from conclusion to question. You catch the scribe's eyes across the room. He doesn't blink. He's too busy writing. Subject showed resistance. Clarification applied. Partial confession obtained. Partial. That word does a lot of work. It means the stonemason admitted to being near the chapel. That's enough. A later trial will fill in the rest. By then, the confession will be cited as fact. Afterward, you untie him gently. He won't speak, won't look at you, but he'll walk. That's more than some manage. Outside, the sun is rising, catching on the dew-soaked stone steps as you leave the hall. You walk slowly, boots clicking, cloak brushing against the cool stone. A passing servant sees you and pretends to tie her shoe until you're gone. Back in your house, you wash your hands. The basin water turns slightly cloudy, though there's no dirt. Just something lingering under the skin. You think of the stonemason's eyes wide, lost stunned by the quiet violence of procedure. You weren't asked to judge, just to perform. But sometimes the chamber feels more like a stage than a courtroom, and you're not sure who the audience is anymore. The letter comes folded, sealed in cheap wax, and slipped under your door before dawn. No name, no title. Just a short line, I want to stop. You know who it's from. The torturer in the next town over. You met him once, gray beard, missing tooth hands like coal shovels. His real name was Hans, but everyone called him that man. Funny how people name what they fear instead of saying it aloud. You read the letter twice, then tuck it into the hearth without lighting a fire. Wanting to quit is not uncommon. Actually quitting, that's something else. The role of torturer, once accepted, was not easily escaped. Town councils depended on continuity, on silence, discretion, and a set of hands that already knew the job. Replacing a torturer meant weeks of secret searching interviews behind curtains and risk. Risk that the tools would be misused or worse, talked about. Most towns didn't allow resignation, not formally. A torturer could be dismissed for incompetence or death. Anything in between created problems. If he left town, what would he say? Who would he talk to? Would he carry secrets with him? Some tried. A few slipped away in the night, vanished to another village with a new name. But they were often found, not by bounty hunters or soldiers, but by need. Eventually, every village needs a man for this job, and word gets around. Some scholars say torturers were as much prisoners as professionals, bound by their knowledge, imprisoned by what they knew how to do. Others argue the role came with enough perks, housing rations protection that few truly wanted out. The truth, like most things in this profession, probably lies somewhere uncomfortable. You once heard of a torturer who tried to join a monastery. They turned him away. The letter burns quietly in your hearth, the wax bubbling like a boil before it sizzles out. That night, Hans knocks at your door. You knew he might come. There's no one else he can talk to. He doesn't sit, just stands near the wall, arms crossed. I can't sleep, he says. I hear things. You pour him a mug of weak ale. He doesn't drink it. I tried to give the tools back, he says. The council said to hold them, just in case. His voice cracks on that last phrase, just in case. Some towns required outgoing torturers to train their replacements. Others kept them on call, a morbid kind of reserve duty, retired but not free. You ask what he'll do now. He shrugs. Maybe fishing. The silence stretches. Outside, an owl hoots. Inside, your hearth flickers low. You offer him the cot. He refuses. Leaves before dawn, quieter than he arrived. You never see him again. Years later, a traveling merchant tells you a story about a man who lived on the river, never spoke carved boats, no one bought. He called him Hans the Quiet. You nod. You know the type. They've built a new scaffold, taller than the last, with fresh timber and extra nails, all stained to look like old wood for drama's sake. It's market day, and the square hums with uneasy energy. You can always tell when a punishment is scheduled. People talk quieter, but they stay longer. The baker's cart sells more buns. Children climb barrels for better views. You're behind the curtain rolling your shoulders. Today's sentence is minor public lashing a dozen strikes for petty fraud, but the crowd expects a performance. That's the tricky part. Pain is predictable. Reactions are not. Botching a public punishment is worse than being too cruel. You've seen it happen. The lash slips. The crowd laughs. The magistrate scowls. You get a visit that night. A formal reprimand. Or worse, another session this time to remind you what proper technique looks like. There's an art to it. The whip must crack, but not tear. The prisoner must cry out, but not collapse. You pace the rhythm, like a drummer in a funeral procession. One beat too fast, and you're a brute. One too slow, and you're a failure. You step out, hood up, hands steady. The crowd quiets not out of respect, but the sort of attention they give wild animals in cages. Curious, wary, not quite sure if you're tame. The fraudster's already tied to the post. He's a cooper's apprentice, barely 20. You saw him once in the tavern. He's trying to look brave, but his hands tremble behind the ropes. The town scribe reads the sentence. You begin. The whip cracks, once sharp, precise. The second strike leaves a welt, but no blood. The crowd murmurs. On the fifth lash, someone yells too soft. On the seventh, a woman turns away, biting her knuckle. By the 12th, the apprentice is sobbing, not from pain, but from humiliation. You stop, step back, wait. The magistrate nods. Applause follows, not loud, but present, polite, as if you were a juggler who did fine, but nothing exceptional. Some scholars claim These performances kept the peace, that they reminded citizens what rules meant. Others argue the opposite, that they turned justice into theater-numbed people, to cruelty, made suffering a communal entertainment. You walk off stage. In the corridor behind the scaffold, you wipe your hands. They smell like pine from the handle of the whip. A boy runs past chasing a wooden hoop. His mother calls him back, glancing nervously at you. Her eyes linger on the whip now resting in your bag. At home, you toss the bag into the corner. It slumps like an empty skin. You wonder if they'll build another scaffold next year. Taller, with better angles for the crowd. You wonder if it matters. Later over your silent meal, you remember the apprentice's eyes, not pleading, not hateful, just resigned. That's when you realize it's not the pain that stays with them. It's knowing that their suffering was choreographed. The dog won't come near your house anymore. It used to sleep on your stoop tail, wagging whenever you stepped out with bones or crusts. Now it howls if you come too close. The villagers whisper that it senses things. That's the word they use when they don't want to say curse. You've become more than a man, or less. Superstition has rewritten you. To some, you are no longer flesh and thought, but omen and echo. A glance from you is blamed for spoiled milk. A shadow crossing someone's path means their child will be born with crooked toes. You once sneezed near a well, and 3 women refused to draw water there for a week. These stories spread faster than confessions. And the worst part, you've stopped denying them. You used to protest, once or twice. I'm just a man, you said. But it made things worse. Denying the curse, they said, was proof you had one. In certain regions, old folk beliefs tied torturers to the devil. Not because of their actions, but because of proximity. You touched suffering daily. That meant you were tainted. A vessel, a risk. Some towns made you wear specific colors, dark gray or dull red, so people would know not to brush against you accidentally. A historian once found a letter from a midwife who claimed a torturer's presence turned her cream sour. Another spoke of a priest who refused to share communion with the man who bends bones. The records rarely name these figures. Torturers are always that man or him shadowed even in ink, and still people came to you, secretly. A farmer with a sick cow leaves herbs at your door. A woman whose husband drinks too much asks if you know things. You don't answer, but you notice her husband stops drinking. Maybe coincidence, maybe fear. Sometimes it's easier to let the legend do the talking. Your reflection in the window looks older, paler, as if the villagers' fears have begun sculpting your face. You once tried smiling at a child. She burst into tears. You haven't tried since. Birds won't nest on your roof anymore. Even Edgar, or the one you called Edgar, avoids the ledge. You sit by your cold hearth and imagine what they say when they pass your house at dusk. Don't point, one parent whispers. He'll know. There's an account in an old chronicle about a torturer who wore a veil whenever he entered the city, not for disguise, but to shield others. Some called it mercy. Others thought it made things worse, like a ghost refusing to admit it was dead. You understand that now. You wrap a scarf around your face before errands, not to hide, just to help the baker's hand shake a little less when she passes you your loaf. The dog still won't return, but the howling has stopped, and for now, that feels like progress. The summons is brief, double duty. 2 words stamped with the seal of the magistrate slipped under your door before dawn. You know what it means. You reach for the black hood, the heavier one. and the long-handled blade kept behind the chest. It's not your tool, not really. But today, you're not just the torturer, you're the executioner. It's not supposed to happen like this. The roles are distinct, or so the town charter says. The torturer handles pain, the hangman handles death. But when the hangman falls ill or disappears, as sometimes happens, you're the next call. Because you already know the ropes. Literally. This wasn't in the contract. But contracts don't matter when no one else wants the job. You step into the square and feel the shift in the crowd. It's not the same as a lashing. There's no murmuring, no giggles. Just a hush, like the town itself is holding its breath. The man is already on the scaffold wrists, tied knees trembling. He stole a priest's silver and set fire to a barn. The sentence is death by hanging, and it falls to you. The rope was prepared by the blacksmith. You double-check the knot. If you botch this, the town won't just blame you. They'll say you wanted him to suffer. That's the danger of doubling roles. When pain is your craft, people assume cruelty is your goal. You adjust the rope carefully. The condemned man won't meet your eyes. Maybe he's superstitious too. There's a debate among scholars whether torturers were commonly made to act as executioners. Some argue it was rare reserved only for emergencies. Others point to budget records and council notes that suggest it happened often quietly, unofficially, whenever convenience demanded it. The magistrate reads the sentence. You wait for the nod. You pull the lever. The man drops the rope, catches the body sways. It's clean, quick, almost merciful. But the silence afterward isn't relief. It's fear. Children are ushered away. Vendors pack early. Even the pigeons seem to avoid the scaffold. You return the hood to its box. Wipe your hands. The rope will be reused, though no one will say so aloud. At home, you sit by the fire, the scent of hemp still clinging to your sleeves. The town doesn't thank you. There's no ceremony, no pay bonus. Only the clerk's usual note duty fulfilled. You recall a rumor years ago of a torturer who refused execution duty. He was replaced within a week. No explanation. Some said he was sent to the mines. Others said he simply disappeared. You're not sure which version scares you more. That night, sleep comes slowly. When it does, your dream is strange. You're climbing a rope that never ends, hands burning the crowd below, cheering softly endlessly. You wake before dawn. The black hood is still hanging by the door, and outside, the wind makes the scaffold creak. You were 11 when you first saw the tools. They weren't polished or displayed, just piled in a crate behind your father's workshop, hidden under a rag that smelled like rust and oil. You weren't supposed to know. But children have a talent for discovering the things they shouldn't. Now, years later, the tools are yours. Not by choice, by lineage. Some torturers inherit the job the way others inherit debt, or a family tavern. Your father did it. His father, too. A quiet profession passed like an illness, with few written instructions and no ceremony. One day, you're just the blacksmith's son. The next, you're his boy. A phrase that means something else entirely in this town. You never talked about it growing up. Your friends assumed your father worked odd hours, that he was a night guard or a private trader. The truth was whispered when it was spoken at all. After your father died, quickly, suddenly, and alone, the council visited before the undertaker. There is precedent, they said, for continuation of service. You remember the phrase? Cold, clean, unavoidable. You could have said no, technically, but they reminded you of the debt your father left. of the roof repairs paid in advance, of the cottage already in your name. And besides, who else would take it? Some scholars believe the hereditary nature of the job was a form of containment. Keep the knowledge in one family, limit exposure, control the stories. Others suggest it was convenience training. A stranger took time. Training a son was natural. There are records of dynasties, of torturers' families, with generations listed only by initials in town ledgers. One entry reads, "Services rendered T.S., son of T.S. No birth date, no death. Just initials and pain." You wonder if your name is in one of those books now. And if your son, should you ever have one, might appear there too. That thought keeps you up sometimes. You still have your father's apron. The leather is worn thin, the straps soft with use. You tell yourself it's for sentimental reasons, but part of you fears the next one won't fit quite right, as if the job itself might reject someone new. Sometimes, villagers forget he's gone. An old woman once asked you if the elders still took walk-ins. You told her no gently. She didn't ask what you meant. There are nights when you hear your father's voice in the tool shed. Not words, just the rhythm of sharpening. The slow scrape of metal on stone. You never go to check. In the drawer by your bed, you keep his last note. It's short. One line. You'll learn when to stop. You've read it 100 times. You still don't know if he meant the tools, the sessions, or the job itself. But each morning, you put on the apron anyway. And wonder if someday someone else will find your note. The forge crackles as you pump the bellows, heat licking at your face. Sparks fly, not from confession or judgment, but from honest work, shoeing a mule, straightening a bent gate hinge. On some days, you're just a blacksmith, a quiet tradesman in a leather apron, surrounded by soot and metal. And that's exactly how you like it. In smaller towns, roles overlap. There's no room for specialization. You mend plows by day and extract confessions by night. One job gets you nods of respect. The other silent stares. People shake your hand for fixing their door latch, then wipe it on their trousers when they think you're not looking. The irony is thick enough to hammer. A man trusted to fix your tools, but not touch your children. Still, the rhythm of the forge is comforting. The hiss of the quenching trough the ring of hammer on iron, the way the metal yields when it's just hot enough. There's a kind of mercy in it. Metal doesn't lie. It bends or it breaks. No half-truths. No crying. Some villagers choose to pretend. Ah, the blacksmith, they say loud enough for others to hear. They buy your nails, your hinges, even your horseshoes. But when you pass them later on the road, they look down. Some towns actually preferred hiring their torturer from among the trades. Smiths, coopers, butchers' men with strong arms and access to tools. It kept the cost down and the secrecy easier. If someone saw you carrying tongs, they assumed you were off to repair a hinge, not a man. Historians have noted this pattern in rural records. The torturer is often listed with a secondary trade. Some believe it was camouflage. Others say it was insurance. If the torture fell out of favor or politics shifted, you'd still be useful. You've come to appreciate that. There's a strange dignity in hammering out a wagon wheel after midnight, or sharpening sickles for farmers who'll never look you in the eye. One day, a child comes into your shop, holding a broken toy sword. You almost wave him away, but then you notice the way he waits, shifting his weight from foot to foot, too nervous to speak. He lays the wooden blade on the bench. "Can you fix it?" he mumbles. You nod. As you work, he watches. Not like others, he's curious, not afraid. When you hand him the mended sword, he smiles and says, "Thanks, Mr. Blacksmith." You don't correct him. He runs off, waving the toy in wide arcs, imagining battles that don't end in trials. You sit back, brush the shavings from your apron, and let the forge settle into coals. The tools for your other job hang silently in the shed behind the shop, untouched for now. The town may remember what you do at night, but today they needed a horseshoe. Tomorrow, maybe a gate latch. And if the toy sword ever breaks again, you hope he brings it back. The council clerk brings your payment in a burlap pouch dropped on your doorstep like spoiled milk. Inside, 10 coins, a folded chit for barley bread, and oddly, a pair of woolen socks. Your monthly wages. They don't always include socks, but someone on the council must have felt generous or guilty. Your work is both essential and invisible. Paid for, but not acknowledged. Necessary, but never respected. It shows in the way your compensation arrives quietly, irregularly, and with little explanation. Years ago, your father told you not to expect gold. They pay enough to keep you in place, he said, and just little enough to remind you you're not like them. Most torturers weren't paid well. That's a misconception. The job's price wasn't in coin, but in what it cost you elsewhere: companionship status, sleep. You could afford bread candles, maybe the occasional cut of meat, but forget about velvet wine or fresh apples in winter. And the payments, strange always. One year, you were given 2 buckets of goose fat. Another, a token for 3 new shirts, redeemable only at a tailor who refused to measure you. Some towns offered bonuses for successful confessions. Others withheld pay if the accused died too quickly. Some scholars argue these bizarre perks were an attempt at normalization. See, the records seem to say he's just another worker. He buys boots and bread like the rest of us. Others believe the oddities were intentional, to isolate, to confuse, to make sure you never quite felt settled in your own skin. The shoes were the strangest. One winter, you received 4 mismatched boots. Lefts only. The clerk apologized. Inventory error, he said. You wore them anyway. You kept track of your wages once for a full year. 43 coins. A pile of salted fish. 2 jars of lamp oil. 1 goat briefly. The goat ran away within the week, and you didn't chase it. The goat had better instincts than you. A page from an old city ledger lists the torturer's salary as modest with provisions. Another lists it under MISC, municipal costs right between chimney cleaning and rat catching. Sometimes the town forgets entirely. You've gone months without pay. Once you reminded the mayor's assistant. She blinked. "Oh," she said, as if you'd asked for extra cake at a funeral. You wonder what would happen if you stopped. If you simply refused the next summons. Would they dock your bread chit? Take your socks back? The bag sits on your table, now half open. The coins glint faintly. You don't count them. You already know the number will be just short of useful. You pull on the wool socks. They itch, but they're warm. Outside, frost creeps along the edge of the shutters. A dog howls, distant, maybe familiar. You settle by the fire, rubbing the edge of a coin between your fingers. It's not enough. It never is. But it has to be. The priest won't look at you. Not at the festival, not at the bakery, and certainly not at the cemetery. You're not surprised. You've long known that in death, as in life, your role does not come with blessings. The graveyard is walled and watched. There's a specific section, unofficial, but unmistakable, where people like you are buried near the back. behind the lichen-stained stone under trees that don't quite bloom. They call it the Crooked Row. You visited it, quietly. It's where your father lies. No marker. Just a rock the size of a fist and a patch of grass that grows more reluctantly than the rest. You once asked the parish clerk about a formal blessing. He stammered, shuffled his papers, and said something about policy. Best to let God sort it quietly, he muttered, eyes fixed on his inkpot. The truth is, many torturers died unblessed, not excommunicated, just bypassed. Their burials happened at dawn or dusk, when fewer people might notice. Some were laid in the churchyard, but not in sanctified ground. Others weren't buried at all by clergy, but by gravediggers with orders to keep it quick and quiet. There are letters from abbots and bishops that speak in careful terms. Certain vocations, though sanctioned by civic duty, may cast spiritual ambiguity upon the soul, which is a long way of saying, we're not sure what to do with you. Some historians think this was an attempt to protect church purity. Others believe it was fear plain and human. What if the torturer's touch lingered after death? What if absolution wasn't strong enough? You've thought about it more lately. The death part. Not dramatically, just practically. You keep your affairs in order. You have a box of letters, a list of debts, and a pouch of coins buried under the floorboards. For no one, really, just in case. Once during a cold spell, the priest passed you in the lane. His candle blew out. You stepped toward him offering yours. He recoiled, mumbled a prayer, and scurried off. That night, you left a fresh taper by the chapel door. The next morning, it was gone. No thanks. No word. Still, you do your job. You attend the executions. You take the council's errands. You live in your house beyond the walls. And one day, when your time comes, you expect to be carried quietly to the Crooked Row. You imagine the scene, a cart with 2 wheels, a thin blanket, 3 gravediggers who don't speak. A shallow grave, a stone that doesn't belong to anyone else. No priest, no bell, just dirt and memory. And maybe a bird overhead, a small one brown feathered watching from a distance. You think if it stays until the last shovelful, that'll be enough. You'll name it Edgar. Again. There's a manuscript hidden beneath a loose board in your shed. Fragile ink faded, its pages stiff with age and fear. You didn't find it. It found you. Passed by a traveling monk who handed it over like a secret too heavy to carry. He wrote this, the monk whispered, after you were done. The man's name was Gregor. You remember him vaguely. A weaver accused of heresy and theft. Quiet, never violent. The type who asked questions at the wrong time. You interrogated him, under order lightly, you recall. A few turns of the screw. The smell of vinegar and damp cloth. And yet what he wrote afterward is more chilling than anything you've ever done. His confession, if it can be called that, isn't about guilt. It's about memory. The sensations, the fear. The strange intimacy of pain delivered by someone who doesn't speak. The way the chamber smelled like iron and sweat. How the candles never flickered. He described you without naming you. The man wore no expression, as if his face had forgotten how. You read the pages slowly, careful not to break the fragile parchment. Some parts shake you. Others confuse. One line stands out. It was not the pain that undid me, but the silence after the world pretending nothing happened. Historians treasure documents like this. First-hand accounts from the other side of your work are rare. Most suspects never wrote. Many couldn't. A few tried, but their writings were destroyed, banned, or buried literally and bureaucratically. You've heard of only a handful that survived. This one, smuggled by monks and copied in secret, is studied now in distant monasteries. The margins are filled with careful notes in Latin speculations, comparisons, footnotes. They analyze every phrase, but you don't think they understand what Gregor meant. He wasn't condemning you. He was naming something deeper, the machinery you're part of, the process, the gray tide that decides who suffers how much and why no one speaks of it afterward. Some scholars argue Gregor exaggerated, that his memory was distorted by trauma. Others insist his words prove the cruelty of medieval justice in its purest form. You think both are wrong. Gregor wasn't writing for them. He was writing for you. You've kept the manuscript hidden, unsure why. Not out of guilt. Guilt implies choice, but perhaps as a reminder that your work touches more than flesh. That silence echoes longer than screams. Sometimes when the wind howls through the cracks in your shutters, you imagine Gregor's voice. Not accusing, just present. A soft thread woven into the fabric of your days. You place the manuscript back under the board. Cover it with straw. Sit by your hearth. Outside, the town sleeps. Bells hush. Candles go out. The wind carries no summons tonight. You close your eyes not to forget, but to remember less sharply. Gregor's words return like breath on cold glass. Even now, I do not hate him. I pity the man who must remember me in silence. But not every duty in medieval life left a mark so heavy. Some roles, while absurd on the surface, carried their own quiet burdens, feathered flapping, and just as persistent in memory. The village awakens slowly, but you are already walking boots damp with dew, the scent of morning earth still clinging to the hem of your wool cloak. Your job begins before the roosters crow, and your enemies' geese, hundreds of them, flocks hissing across the royal highway like feathered anarchists, utterly convinced that they rule this particular stretch of gravel. You stand by the milestone near the edge of the village, waving a crooked stick. The king's messengers are coming, and the road must be clear not just for appearance, but for actual royal comfort. A startled horse means delays, and delays mean fines for the village. So it falls to you, the appointed goose herder of the crown's right-of-way. By medieval standards, it's a decent gig. You're paid in beer most days, sometimes a wedge of cheese if the bishop is visiting. You have status, sort of. People avoid you, but they do it respectfully. You smell of feathers and stress. Your thighs are strong from running. You've invented 5 different goose calls, none of them flattering. It's said that some royal roads employed entire teams of goose chasers, men, boys, sometimes even trained dogs. And while most historians agree, these roles were informal records from Flanders, and parts of northern England suggest village councils did maintain specific rosters. Which geese belonged to whom? What paths did they favor? And how many times could a single bird halt a duchess's litter before the herder was docked his ale? Some scholars remain puzzled by how formalized this odd task became. Was it a regional quirk or a widespread rural necessity? Surviving manuscripts mention fowl lords or quack watchers, though the terminology blurs between satire and sincerity. One surviving woodcut shows a goose chaser mid-stride, mouth agape, arms extended like a scarecrow mid-audition. The goose, perfectly calm, walks straight toward him. The caption, "Ya fool of feathers." You brush past the village baker, who nods solemnly. He's seen you lose battles before. Ahead, a feathered battalion blocks the path again. You take a deep breath, raise your stick, and begin the ancient chant. Off with ye feather fiends. The geese are unimpressed. You wouldn't think wading into a swamp at dawn to wrestle with bloodthirsty worms could be a paid profession. Yet here you are, bare-legged in icy mud, one hand on your bucket, the other swatting midges that refuse to mind their business. The town calls you a leech collector, but not kindly. You're ankle deep in a sluggish pond outside town, where the banks collapse into brown water and frogs thump like old boots into the reeds. Your job tempt leeches to latch onto your flesh, then peel them off and plop them into a wooden jar. The method is as medieval as it is effective. No bait works quite like a warm human leg. You grimace as another slimy tickle finds your calf. That's number 12. Only 24 more, and you'll have enough to trade with the barber surgeon down the lane. Leeches were a cornerstone of medieval medicine. Physicians believed illnesses stemmed from imbalanced humors, blood bile phlegm, and that removing blood could restore harmony. Hence leeching. The best leeches came from clean ponds and plump townsfolk, preferably those who bathed occasionally. And so, the leech collector became a necessary link in a very odd chain of care. But you're not just any collector. You know which ditches produce the fattest stock. You time your visits around moon phases, believing, with no real proof, that leeches bite better under a waxing moon. Some call it superstition. You call it strategy. Collectors, usually women and children, often very poor, worked early hours and returned covered in welts. Some tried to thicken their skin with garlic paste or beeswax. Others simply got used to bleeding. The work was seasonal, the pay unpredictable, and the prestige non-existent. Yet for all its discomforts, towns relied on you. Apothecaries needed your jars, surgeons needed your squirming harvest, and quacks, those self-taught healers with a flair for dramatic diagnosis, loved to brag about their freshest leeches. Oddly, a few collectors gained reputations as leech whisperers. Local lore claimed that some could summon an entire pond's worth of parasites with a whistle or chant. Ludicrous scoff most historians. Likely a form of early branding, say others. One 14th century diary even mentions a leech collector named Magda, who swore she could predict weather by the wiggle of her haul. There is no scholarly consensus on whether collectors were officially hired by town councils or simply tolerated like crows on the roof. Some towns taxed the trade. Others banned it entirely during festivals, citing the smell. What's certain is the odd status you hold in the village. Children dare each other to touch your leech pail. The baker's wife crosses herself when you pass. But the physician, he tips his hat, quietly, respectfully. Your fingers are numb. Your legs look like a bad tapestry. But your jar is full, and the sun has barely cleared the chapel's roof. You limp back toward town, blood trickling under your skirts, humming a half-forgotten tune about healing and hunger. A goat bleats from the roadside. You nod, because somehow it understands. The scent hits you before the door swings open, beeswax cigar ash, and something aggressively minty. You're ushered into a cramped chamber, lined with ledgers and beard trimmings. At the center stands a man in a burgundy sash, squinting at your chin like it's a suspicious map. You're about to be inspected, not for health, not for crime, but for beard compliance. In 18th century Bavaria, facial hair wasn't just personal flair, it was civic duty. The man before you is the beard inspector part bureaucrat, part barber, all judgment. His job, to ensure that every eligible male in town maintains a beard of correct length, shape, and cleanliness according to state mandate. The exact rules shift over time, but today the code demands no shorter than a thumb's joint, no longer than a child's fist, and combed by morning mass. You wonder who came up with those measurements. The inspector does not smile. Facial hair had long been entangled with social status. Beards were seen as marks of piety, masculinity, and even fiscal responsibility. A disheveled beard implied laziness, possibly descent. Too neat, and you might be mistaken for a fop, or worse French. Bavaria, ever fond of order, took this grooming paranoia to new heights. Some towns implemented beard taxes, while others enforced inspections with fines or public shaving. Imagine being led to the town square seated on a three-legged stool and trimmed by decree, while onlookers whispered about your bristle shame. You stand still as the inspector peers closer. He uses a small wooden comb and a tiny ivory ruler. He grunts, then jots something into a booklet labeled Harp-Flicked Book Beard Duty Log. It's oddly satisfying. Curiously, the role of beard inspector wasn't always dreaded. In some parishes, it was an honor granted to retired soldiers or master barbers. They took pride in their craft, often developing secret ratios and favored oils. One popular blend involved pine resin bear fat and clove, a combination described by one widow as heroic but tragic. Researchers continue to debate whether beard inspection originated purely from religious edicts or whether it evolved from early guild regulations. Some suggest it began as satire and was taken too seriously. Others believe it helped enforce hygiene in crowded urban quarters. Surviving church records mention beard fines as common tithes placed right between bread levies and bell maintenance. Your own beard, modest, tidy, and slightly lopsided, passes muster. The inspector nods once and waves you out. You breathe easier, though the minty cloud clings to your coat. As you return to the cobbled street, a group of boys reenacts a beard inspection with a broom and a chicken feather. One demands, "Declare your follicles, scoundrel," before collapsing in giggles. The real inspector passes by moments later. He pretends not to notice. You head toward the market, where whispers float about a man fined for having ambiguous whiskers. There are even rumors of an underground barber who alters beards to match inspection codes for a fee, of course. Behind you, the bell tower tolls once. Inspection hour ends. Your chin for now is safe. It's midnight when your shift begins. Not that time matters when your job is ankle deep in other people's digestion. You carry a long-handled scoop, 2 iron buckets, and the dubious honor of being called a night soil man. No applause, no procession, just the quiet slosh of medieval shame. As you step through the sleeping town, the air is thick with wood smoke, wet hay, and something less poetic. You know every creaky gate and every groaning privy because you're the one who empties them. Not for love, not even for much money, but because someone has to. By torchlight, you unlatch a narrow door beside a tavern. Inside, a stone chute angles downward from the upstairs privy to a wooden box. You open the lid. You breathe through your mouth, and you begin to scoop. In most towns, privies emptied into cesspits, brick-lined holes buried in backyards, forgotten until they weren't. When the pits filled, it was your job to haul the contents out bucket by heavy bucket and transport it to a dumping field beyond the town walls. Some cities, like London, regulated night soil routes, assigning men specific alleys and requiring lanterns on their carts. Others simply hoped the neighbors wouldn't complain. You work fast. The faster you scoop, the less time you spend imagining what's in the bucket. Your shoulders ache. Your boots squelch. But there's dignity in rhythm. Oddly enough, night soil was valuable. Farmers bought it as fertilizer. Tanneries sometimes used it in leather making. And alchemists, well, they always wanted something strange. In certain cities, taxes on human waste helped fund public wells or bridge repairs. There's even record of a Parisian duke who invested in a night soil cooperative. Filth, he reportedly said, is the one trade that never runs dry. Some scholars remain divided on whether night soil men were outcasts or simply invisible. In some records, they're paid handsomely. In others, they're fined for stench violations. A 15th century Italian town mandated floral garlands be tied to the carts to dignify the journey they claimed, more likely to distract the nose. You pause beside a butcher's gate to rest. A black cat winds around your ankles. You tip your hat. She's your only co-worker who doesn't gag. Nearby, a child stirs in a second-floor window, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He watches you lift a bucket tip its contents into a sealed barrel and wipe your brow with a rag. He waves. You nod. There's something strangely sacred about being seen and not judged. Your last stop tonight is the monastery. The monks are early risers, and their privy chute is famously treacherous. You brace yourself on the stone stair, inhale sharply, and begin the climb. Above, a faint bell chimes for matins. Below, the street is silent again. You finish your rounds just as dawn brushes the rooftops with pink. You smell like your profession, but also like someone who got things done. And that, in this town, is enough. There are many ways to serve a monarch. Some kneel in council chambers. Others ride into battle. And then, there's you standing in a dim corridor beside a chamber pot, swirling a pewter spoon through someone else's business. You are the royal urine taster. Technically, your title is more dignified water doctor, chamber physician, or physiognomist of humors, but everyone knows what you really do. You examine smell, and yes, occasionally taste the king's urine, all in the name of health. The chamberlain hands you the sample. It's still warm. You squint at the color. Pale straw with a faint cloudiness. You hold it to the candlelight tilt swirl, then raise it to your nose. Honeyed oats with a hint of iron. No almond scent, that's good. That would mean poison. You make a quiet note on your wax tablet. Steady stream. Mellow fragrance. Slight froth. Medieval medicine placed immense trust in uroscopy, the study of urine to diagnose internal imbalances. Physicians believed urine revealed the state of the body's four humors: blood phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. A deep red could mean fever. A sweet scent, diabetes. A blue tint, possibly melancholia or a curse. But monarchs didn't just want charts. They wanted certainty. And so someone had to get closer than any scholar would dare. That someone was you. Royal courts across Europe employed specialists in urine reading. You studied from color wheels, circular charts, painted with golden arcs of every known hue. Some were poetic, like the juice of boiled onions. Others blunt, turbid, like a donkey's wake. You learned to translate these shades into advice. More pears, fewer figs, less wine after dusk. Some scholars argue the tastings were exaggerated. Surely symbolic, they say. No one actually sipped. Others disagree. Surviving manuals from Persian and Byzantine physicians describe specific flavor notes and aftertastes. There's even a 13th century German poem that rhymes bladder wine with divine sign. You set the sample down. You've seen worse, much worse. Like last autumn, when the queen's second cousin produced something that shimmered. The whole palace whispered for weeks. Despite the strangeness of your role, you carry status. Your opinion can delay battles, shift marriages, or cancel a feast. When you declare the king's urine robust, the court breathes easier. When you frown well, physicians scramble, and the kitchens start boiling barley. Behind you, a courtier clears his throat. Will His Majesty need more fennel? He asks. You nod sagely. And no eels before noon. He bows and retreats. You gather your notes, cork the sample, and tuck the spoon into its velvet pouch. The pouch bears the royal crest. It's embroidered with lilies. Outside the chamber, servants step aside as you pass. They wrinkle their noses, but no one speaks. You are the only one who can say with confidence that the king is well, from the inside out. And that is worth something. The sound is unmistakable. Click, pull, snap. Again and again. Your fingers, raw from friction, continue their rhythm. You sit on a low stool, beside a loom, not weaving, not spinning, but winding wool. All day. Every day. And you're not even paid. You're a wool winder, and your father is a guild member. That's why you're here. The spindle beside you turns lazily winding skeins into tidy loops. The wool must be even unknotted and precisely measured, or your father will face fines. Guild rules are strict. Each artisan must prove his household contributes. And since you're a daughter, that means unpaid labor. Your hands, your time, your blisters, none of it counts officially. But miss a quota, and the family's license could be suspended. You reach for another skein. It's coarser than the last. Your thumb splits slightly. You suck the sting and keep going. Medieval textile guilds were complex, often male-dominated systems of economic control. They regulated who could sell what where and for how much. Membership required dues, apprenticeships, and proof of skill. But behind every carded fleece and dyed tunic was an invisible network of women and girls who prepared the material. Not for coin, but for compliance. Many guilds required proof of female assistance. Some towns documented this openly. Others implied it. Household production was expected. In cities like Ghent or York, wool winding was a family affair. Mothers, daughters, even grandmothers worked late into the night. One ledger from 1374 lists a girl named Elis, whose blisters numbered more than her years. She was 9. There is no scholarly consensus on how much recognition these women received. Some suggest their labor was quietly celebrated in guild songs or tokens. Others argue they were deliberately erased, absorbed into the identity of the male artisan. Your own story isn't unique, but you have made the task your own. You sort fibers by scent, earthy wools from upland sheep, lanolin-heavy strands from more grazed flocks. You tie ribbons around your favorite bundles and hum tunes to keep the rhythm. You've even named your spindle Mabel. Occasionally, you hear footsteps outside and hope it's the guild clerk coming with good news that your father's dues are accepted, that your day's work passed muster. Instead, it's your little brother chewing on a heel of bread and tracking mud across the floor. He asks if wool tastes like mutton. You don't answer. You stretch your back. The stool creaks. A draft sneaks under the door, rustling the curls of wool beside you. You tuck them into a cloth sack, tie the string, and set the bundle by the hearth. Tomorrow, you'll do it all again. But for now, the house is quiet. The loom's shadow stretches across the floor. Your fingertips throb, but the bundle is perfect, tight, even, proud. You may not be listed in the guild records, but somewhere your father will stand before a table of bearded men and say, "My household meets the standard." And that is you. The sun is high, and the orchard hums with quiet menace. Bees loiter around the crab-apple trees. A goat eyes your satchel suspiciously. Somewhere nearby, a child giggles, though you've told them this is not a game. You're on cider watch. specifically crabapple watch. Your job: guard the fermenting barrels. The apples are small, sharp, and stubborn, perfect for brewing hard cider, and even more perfect for attracting thieves both human and hoofed. You sit on a stool between two crooked trees, eyes scanning the path, one hand resting on a slingshot. The other holds a wooden ladle, not for drinking, just for dramatic flair. Fermenting fruit in the open was common practice in smaller villages. Barns lacked the space, and the sour smell was best kept downwind. Barrels were tucked into orchards half buried to stabilize temperature. It worked well, except when boys with flagons or goats with no manners discovered them. And so the crab apple watcher. Not a glamorous job, but an essential one. You don't just guard the barrels. You monitor the bubbles. You scare away flies. You shoo off lovers thinking the orchard is private. You sniff for rot. And when the cider's ready, you help carry it carefully, reverently back to town. Some days you bring a book. Other days it's just you and the bees. Oddly, this role comes with authority. If someone tampers with a barrel under your watch, you can report them to the ale taster or cider warden. In some towns, watchers were deputized during harvest season. Your badge, a red sash, and a spoon carved with an apple. There's debate among scholars as to whether the role was official across regions or a local custom in orchard-heavy shires. Some say it stemmed from religious taboos, fermenting being sacred not to be spoiled. Others argue it was economic. Crab apple cider fetched high prices at market, especially in drought years when grain beer suffered. You spot movement. A goat inching toward a barrel with calculated mischief. You cluck your tongue. It hesitates. You raise your slingshot, not to fire, just to remind. The goat narrows its eyes and retreats with offended dignity. You win this round. You've had worse intruders. Once, a baker's apprentice tried siphoning from a barrel using a hollow reed. You caught him mid-sip, declared him uncasked, and made him scrub the entire orchard fence. He never returned. The wind shifts. The smell of yeast and wild apple drifts through the trees. It's nearly time. You lift the ladle, tap the side of the barrel, and listen glug glug. Pause. The rhythm is good. The cider is thinking. You write a quick note on your bark tablet, ferment sound. Goat repelled. One bee sting left hand. By dusk, the trees cast long shadows over the barrels. You cover them with linen knot, the cords tight, and shoulder your satchel. The orchard murmurs behind you, a sleepy ferment of leaves and cider dreams. And somewhere deep inside a barrel the bubbles keep rising. A single bolt of lightning, a flash of blinding white, and everything changes. The town tower smolders. The weather vane spins loose, and standing at the base of it all, looking bewildered and slightly singed, is the bell ringer. You. It wasn't your fault. Probably. Your post is in the belfry, high above cobbled roofs and nesting swallows. Every hour you ring the great bell, marking time, warning danger, announcing births, deaths, and festivals. But during storms, that's when things get tricky. Bells were believed to ward off thunder. They break the clouds, said one local proverb, and scatter demons. Towns paid good coin to have their bells rung during tempests. The belief was so strong that many towers bore inscriptions like Fulgura Frango, I break lightning, which unfortunately they sometimes did. When lightning strikes a bell tower, it doesn't politely knock. The charge seeks metal, and you faithful ringer are very near it. Some towns fitted towers with rudimentary rods. Others trusted prayer and insulation made from sheep wool. You wore boots lined with waxed linen, not for fashion, for survival. The day it struck you had just begun the warning peal. Thunder rolled. A flash blinded your left eye for 10 full minutes, and then silence too perfect, too eerie. The rope smoldered. The bell shook. You staggered down the spiral stairs, with your hair standing straight out, smelling faintly of ozone and regret. Now the town gathers. The mayor crosses himself. The priest mutters about omens. And somehow blame drifts upward toward the tower, toward the rope, toward you. Some scholars argue the lightning bell connection was largely superstition. A charming ritual, they say, with no meteorological merit. Others disagree, citing 17th century studies showing a correlation between bell ringing and atmospheric discharge. One French ordinance from 1786 forbade storm ringing, altogether too many towers burned. Still, villagers cling to their beliefs. To them, your ringing kept storms at bay, and if lightning struck anyway, clearly, you didn't ring hard enough. You walk through town now, a local curiosity. Children peek at your singed cuffs. A baker gives you a roll to restore your strength. One old woman tucks a sprig of rowan into your sleeve. For warding, she says. You thank her. Quietly. At sunset, you return to the tower. The bell still hangs soot-blackened but whole. You touch the rope. It's been replaced, fresh hemp-clean knots. Your palms tingle. You ring once. Just once. The sound rolls across the rooftops, deep and low, like a dragon waking. Birds scatter. The square grows still. No lightning. Not this time. You sit beside the bell, watching twilight settle over the town. The air smells like ash and rain and distant bread. Your fingers drum the floor. You survived. Again. You're still the bell ringer. And for now, that's enough. You arrive late to the funeral, but that's part of the act. Mourning waits for no one but you. You bring the tears. You are a professional mourner. Your shawl is black. Your eyes already red-rimmed, helped along with a dab of onion tucked in your sleeve. You slip into the procession, wailing, clutching your chest, gasping like grief itself is clawing at your ribs. Some people whisper. Others nod solemnly. A few sniffle, unsure if your cries are contagious. Hired grief was no joke. In many medieval and early modern cultures, especially in southern Europe and parts of the Middle East, it was expected. The richer the deceased, the louder the lament. Families hired mourners to sob, dramatically chant praises, and beat their chests during the procession. It wasn't fraud. It was performance. A public spectacle of loss. Your fee depends on flair. For a noble funeral, you're expected to faint at least once, preferably near the bier. If someone rushes to catch you, that's bonus points. Tears are ideal. Screams optional. Authenticity not required. You once performed at a baker's funeral and accidentally shouted the wrong name. Bless you, Bernard, you sobbed even though the man was named Odo. His widow corrected you mid-cry. You pivoted beautifully. Odo. Yes, Odo. Oh, the pain. You still got paid. Historians remain divided on whether this profession was respected or ridiculed. Some records describe mourners as essential parts of funerary rites. Others depict them as comic relief, parodied in plays and mocked in street songs. A 14th century English ballad features a mourner who weeps so hard she forgets who died. Another German satire involves two hired wailers who start arguing mid-procession about who's louder. Your toolkit is humble, a black veil, a good memory for names and strong diaphragm control. You also carry licorice root to soothe your throat after prolonged keening. Your voice, loud, raspy sincere, is your livelihood. But today's funeral is different. You were hired by a tailor's niece, young pale, and with an odd glint in her eye. Be loud, she said, but not too sad. You ask no questions. You never do. Halfway through the sermon, you wail on cue. The priest stumbles over his verse. The widow presses a handkerchief to her lips, not crying, but clearly trying not to laugh. You glance over. Your eyes meet hers. For a moment, you wonder if this was all a joke. But no. The coffin is real. The loss is real. The laughter. Maybe that's real too. You adjust your shawl, raise your arms, and cry out once more. Later at the wake, you sip watered wine and let your voice recover. A child asks if you're always this sad. You reply, only between meals. There's talk of another funeral next week, a fishmonger who fell into his own barrel. You've already practiced a line. He swam away too soon. The niece presses a coin into your hand. It's more than expected. She says nothing, just nods. You nod back veil, slipping slightly. Grief is strange. So is laughter. You've learned to carry both. The water laps gently at the hull as you stir from sleep. You're not in a house. You're not even on land. You live on a boat, and this morning, the yeast is already rising. You're the floating baker of Bruges. Your bakery is a barge long, narrow, and fitted with a wood-fired oven carefully braced against swaying. The bread you bake must be fresh, crusty, and compliant with guild codes. But more importantly, it must survive the journey, by oar, by hook, or by rope tow. Every morning you untie from the quay, before the church bells toll. You push off slowly poles scraping against stone. Onboard sacks of flour are lashed beside barrels of rainwater. The oven glows, faintly already warm, from last night's embers. You knead by lantern light rocking gently as fish ripple beneath you. Your job isn't just about baking, it's about moving. Bruges, like many medieval cities, relied on canals for transport. Waterways were cleaner than streets, faster than foot traffic, and less prone to noble tantrums. Floating traders became common brewers, tanners even barbers. But bakers, you were a special breed. Your license allows you to moor at 4 designated markets. You're forbidden to sell past sunset, and your bread must be no heavier than 2 loaves per elbow, an old unit roughly a forearm span. Violate the rules, and the Bakers' Guild will fine you, or worse, revoke your baking paddle. There is no scholarly consensus on how widespread floating bakeries truly were. Some argue they were wartime adaptations, safe from fire mobile during sieges. Others say they flourished in marshy regions where real estate was scarce. A few even suggest they served as covert meeting places for heretics. A loaf and a sermon, one chronicle teases. You bake quietly, checking the dough's rise with a practiced eye. You've named your sourdough starter Willem. He's temperamental, but dependable. The first batch goes to the fishermen upriver, who pay in smoked eel. The second, to a widow with soft coins and a soft heart. The third batch, if the wind is right, goes to the guild hall. As your boat drifts beneath a narrow bridge, a child shouts, "It smells like cake." You wave with floury hands. He waves back, then nearly drops his lute in the canal. Life on water has its oddities. Once a swan stole a roll off your deck. Another time a rat tried to stow away in your flour sack. You keep a cat. Now she sleeps on warm loaves, guards against rodents, and answers only to Duchess. You pull ashore near the tanner's quarter tie, your rope to a rusted ring, and ring a bell carved into the prow. Within minutes, townsfolk gather holding out cloth sacks and copper coins. You serve each loaf with a nod, a joke, or a proverb. Warm bread, warm heart, you murmur. No crumbs in church, you warn. By noon, the deck is empty, the oven cool. You push off once more, drifting back toward home, if a boat with wheels of dough and dreams of crust can be called that. You think it can. The town square quiets as you step onto the platform bell, in one hand, scroll in the other. You clear your throat, then pause. One wrong word today, and you might end up in the ducking pond. You're the town crier, and you've memorized the forbidden words. Your job is to speak for the Council of the Crown, and sometimes the local cheese guild. Decrees, proclamations, market prices all must be delivered aloud clearly and with a voice that carries over goats' carts and gossip. But not everything can be said. Not everything should be said. And woe to the crier who forgets which is which. You unroll the parchment. Today's news, a tax on salt, a warning about counterfeit weights, and a reminder that anyone found poaching swan eggs will be flogged again. You glance at the fourth item. Do not mention the mayor's foot rash and skip it. Wisely, criers were crucial in towns where few could read. They announced time justice and scandal, but their speech was tightly controlled. Certain topics, Royal Health Guild secrets, unconfirmed deaths, were strictly off limits. Even vocabulary was policed. Some towns banned words like plague or fire unless officially declared. Better to whisper behind hands than risk a panic. You remember one poor fellow who shouted rot during a barley blight. The farmers revolted. He was dunked in the pond 3 times and forced to wear a turnip hat. It never quite dried. Historians debate whether town criers were truly punished for misspeaking, or if the threat was largely symbolic. Some records suggest ducking was common. Others imply it was rare and mostly theatrical. A 16th century manual from Bruges lists 27 banned phrases, including mystical cabbage and holy worms, though no one knows why. Today, you stick to safe phrasing. You announce the market's relocation due to smells, not due to the fishmonger's feud with the candlemaker. You refer to last night's noise incident without mentioning the goat in the bell tower. Everyone knows. Everyone nods. There's an art to euphemism. Instead of arson, you say unscheduled warmth. Instead of death, you say permanent quietude. The town listens. The town chuckles. And you live to ring another day. You ring your bell, once clang, and declare the end of the announcements. A boy tosses you a walnut in thanks. You pocket it with a bow. Walking back through the alleys, you practice tomorrow's script. There's a guild meeting a stolen shoe and a pig that wandered into the weaver's shop. You'll find a way to spin it. You always do. Your voice is hoarse, your scroll ink-smudged, but your mind is sharp. You remember every banned phrase, every double meaning, every eyebrow-raising metaphor that's earned a glare. Because to speak is power, but to almost say something forbidden, that's art. You hold the egg up to the sunlight, rotating it slowly between your fingers. Smooth shell, pale ivory, faint speckling good. You listen next, shaking gently beside your ear. No suspicious slosh, no sinister rattle. You place it gently in the padded basket. Next, you're the official egg inspector of Florence. It's an oddly quiet job, requiring more finesse than force. But make no mistake, egg fraud is serious business. A cracked shell passed off as fresh. That's one thing. A hollowed egg filled with lime water and sealed with wax. That's a scandal. And in this market, you've seen it all. Eggs were vital to the medieval diet. Portable, protein rich, and used in everything from bread to medicine to paint. But they spoiled quickly. And in the bustle of Florence's streets, with merchants shouting, cats prowling, and hens flapping out of crates, it was easy for deceit to slip through. So the city hired you. Each morning you set up your table near the Duomo. You carry a small lamp, a felt cloth, and your tools, a pin for leaks, a magnifying glass for stamps, and a piece of black velvet for candling holding eggs up to the light to check for cracked spots or mysterious floaters. Your reputation hinges on discretion. You never call out a merchant loudly. Instead, you lean in, whisper your concern, and gently slide the offending egg back across the table. Most nod and swap it. Some argue. A few storm off. One once threw a yoke at your cloak. It missed. There's debate among scholars about how widespread this profession was. Some records from Florence, Bologna, and Marseille describe egg inspectors as city appointed. Others suggest they were hired by bakers' guilds or apothecaries. A Florentine decree from 1437 warns of artful deceit with poultry fruit, which seems poetic until you realize it refers to someone painting over rot. You recall the Great Goose Egg incident of 1452. A merchant tried to pass off duck eggs as geese dyed brown with walnut oil. You caught it. The guild fined him a silver florin and made him wear a feathered cap, reading Egg Fool for 3 days. Justice, you suppose. Your work isn't just about fraud prevention. It's about civic pride. Florence prides itself on purity of art, of wool of cuisine. An egg in a cathedral custard must be flawless. Even the Pope's omelet demands scrutiny. You inspect another dozen. A crack here, a weevil hole there. You separate the basket into approved and suspicious, nodding politely as merchants await their verdict. A child tugs your cloak and asks, "Can eggs lie?" You reply, "Only when no one listens closely." By dusk, your basket is full, your hands dusted with straw, and your eyes slightly crossed from staring at ovals all day. You pack your tools, lower your lantern, and head toward the bridge. You pass a painter buying eggs for pigment. He salutes you with a yolky thumb. You smile back. No one notices a perfect egg, but they remember a bad one. That's why you're here. The corpse lies still, limbs posed, just so beard waxed and parted, and sprigs of rosemary tucked into each sleeve. You crouch beside him, tilting the chin with 2 fingers, inspecting your handiwork one last time. You are the corpse dresser. The stone floor is cold beneath your knees. A basin of lavender water steams nearby its scent, mingling with beeswax old cloth and the faint iron tang of finality. You've washed the body, gently trimmed nails, combed hair, and powdered the face. The mustache was the trickiest it always is. In towns where death arrived, often and departed slowly, there was a need for specialists who could make the deceased presentable for burial. You weren't a priest. You weren't a mourner. You were the quiet artisan of endings. Clothing mattered. A noble might demand ceremonial robes, a scribe his inkwell tucked into his belt. Children wore garlands. Widows requested perfumes layered in hopes the scent would linger through mourning. You've learned to work with stiff limbs and stubborn joints, coaxing dignity from what remains. Some scholars say corpse dressers were often women chosen for their gentleness and discretion. Others argue the role rotated among guild members, tailors, midwives, even bakers during plague years. There is no consensus, only stories. One French ledger lists a groomer of the departed, paid in bread beer, and a single silk ribbon. Today's client is an apothecary. You've dressed him in blue, his favorite with a dried poppy tucked behind one ear. He once claimed that death should smell like a spice drawer and a thunderstorm. You've done your best. Your toolkit includes linen strips, rose water, stiff brushes, and a small tin of beeswax mixed with charcoal for touch-ups. You hum while you work, not out of habit, but because silence makes the room heavier. Once you were asked to dress a jester, his family insisted on a smile. You carved one with wax just barely and placed a daisy in his hand. When mourners passed, some wept. One laughed. You considered it a success. You remember your mentor's lesson? Make them look like they're dreaming. You try. Always. The apothecary's beard glistens now with a final stroke of oil. You fold his hands, tuck a note beneath them. An herbal recipe, perhaps a farewell. You step back. There's debate, of course, about whether this kind of preparation mattered. Some said it was vanity. Others believed a tidy death eased the soul's journey. A few towns saw corpse dressing as sacred duty, a last kindness in a world rarely kind. You wrap your tools in a cloth bow once and close the shutters. Outside the bell tolls. The procession will arrive soon. You leave through the servant's door, quiet as breath. A passerby catches your eye. "You've been with the apothecary?" she asks. You nod. He looks peaceful, she says. You nod again. It's the best review you can get. Not everyone remembers the corpse dresser. But they always remember how someone looked at the end. The chamber smells like linen, crushed thyme, and faint dust. You kneel beside the mattress, fluffing hay, with practiced care, one hand stirring the straw, the other gently pressing for lumps. You are the hay mattress, fluffer, an expert in nobility's bedtime comfort. Your clients, countesses, with delicate spines, earls with fussy hips, visiting bishops, whose backs cannot abide goose feathers. And so, twice weekly, you perform a solemn ceremony refreshing the hay. This is not simply tossing in fresh straw. It's an art. The hay must be aired, shaken, fluffed, and perfumed. Scented herbs, lavender, mint, marjoram are bundled in linen sachets and hidden inside. You rotate the filling, smooth the ticking, and finally bow the mattress by striking it with a curved birch wand. It's tradition. Also a warning to any lingering mice. You fluff slowly, methodically. Each corner matters. Each puff of straw might mean a better night's sleep for someone with enough power to fine you for creases. Mattresses in noble households weren't the downy feather beds you might imagine. Hay was common cheaper than wool cooler in summer and easier to replace. The wealthy layered their bedding hay mattress below wool-stuffed pad, above linen sheets on top. But hay remained the base, and that base needed upkeep. There's no official guild for your work, but certain houses pass down techniques like sacred knowledge. Aunt Petronella taught you to identify moldy hay by smell alone. Uncle Milo insisted on the triple turn method, flip fluff fold. You've added your own touches, folded corners, rosemary braids tied to bedposts. Historians argue whether mattress fluffing was ceremonial or merely practical. Some claim it became a ritual part of courtly welcome, like foot washing or bread breaking. Others say it was a quiet labor, ignored unless done poorly. A 15th century Venetian journal praises one fluffer for bringing dreams with the scent of mint. High praise indeed. You finish the fluff and smooth the linen. The sheets are newly laundered, dried on rose bushes for scent. You step back admiring the gentle mound, then gently press a palm into the center. It sinks with a sigh. Perfect. You light a taper and pass it around the bed. Once, not for warmth, but to reveal any overlooked fleas. None appear. Duchess will sleep unbitten tonight. The chambermaid enters, nods once, and leaves a sugared plum on the washstand. A silent thank you. You gather your tools, sachets, wand, and linen apron flecked with hay. Your shoes leave soft trails on the rush-covered floor. Outside, the hallway is cooler. The scent of polished wood and beeswax takes over again. A page passes snickering, still fluffing straw like it's a throne, he quips. You smile. I do my best to keep dreams lofty. He stops grinning. Touché. As you step into the next room, you find another bed, another bundle of straw, another restless soul awaiting softness. You kneel again, fingers parting hay like pages in a book. Tonight someone will sleep without knowing why it feels better. But you'll know. The graveyard at midnight is quiet but not silent. You sit beneath the chapel eaves, quill in hand, lantern flickering ears alert. Somewhere an owl hoots, a mouse scurries through frostbitten grass, and from the far corner of the cemetery, thump. You dip your quill and write, unclear, knock northwest quadrant, possibly root shift or mole. You're the grave watcher, and your ledger is your legacy. Hired by the parish to deter body snatchers, pranksters, and spectral rumors, you spend your nights among the stones. But more than just watching, you record. Every creak, groan, rustle, and odd murmur gets logged. Not because the dead are dangerous, but because the living are nervous. In a time when grave robbing was profitable, and tales of revenants stirred public panic towns, employed watchers to guard the final resting places. Some sat in towers, others patrolled with dogs. You prefer the bench by the yew tree and a notebook of suspicious noises. You flip back a few pages to last Tuesday, series of groans. Source goat entangled in cassock. Then repetitive tapping. Likely wind plus loose iron gate. Your favorite entry remains 3 sneezes. Confirmed sexton asleep in hedge. Historians continue to debate whether these notes were taken seriously. Some treat the ledgers as whimsical archives of village life. Others argue they formed the earliest versions of neighborhood surveillance. One scholar even claims grave watching was theater performed for the peace of mourners more than the prevention of crime. Tonight your hands are cold but steady. You sip from a flask of cider, the spiced kind the crabapple watcher trades you in, thanks for last year's lost goat. There's a low moan behind the apothecary's tomb. You rise, lantern swinging. Step by step you approach boots soft on damp moss. You pause. A breeze sighs through the hedge. You write soft moan, unconfirmed. Possible weather, but poorly sealed marble. Most of the time, that's what it is, weather and bad sealing. But not always. Once you chased off 2 gravediggers posing as mourners. Another night you caught a drunk singing lullabies to a headstone labeled mother-in-law. You let him finish. Your job isn't just about silence. It's about respect. You ensure the resting stay rested. You give the living something to lean on. There's a watcher, they whisper so we can sleep. A fox darts past. You jot it down. The moon begins its descent. The sky lightens to slate. Birds start to stir. You close your ledger, wrap it in oilcloth, and return it to the chapel shelf beside 20 years of other watch notes, all filled with sighs, creaks, and the occasional fart-labeled crypt echo. You snuff the lantern. You walk home as the town wakes. No one thanks you. No one waves. But tonight the graveyard slept. And so, at last, can you. So now, with the last grave quiet and the final goose herded, we draw the curtain on a world of strange medieval jobs, of men who chase thunder with bells, women who wept for coin, and bakers who rode their dough through fog. Let your thoughts settle like straw in a noble's mattress. Imagine the slow creak of a barge on sleepy waters, the soft hum of fermenting cider in a hidden orchard, the faint scratching of a quill logging midnight mysteries. The world was once filled with odd duties, whispered titles, and tiny dignities. And maybe just, maybe so, is yours. Rest easy now. Tomorrow brings no geese,